I moved to Wisconsin when I was 12 years old. I grew up in a small town called LaGrange, Tennessee, where I lived with my grandmother and my extended family. We lived in a 3-room shack with no indoor plumbing. And when I say no indoor plumbing, I mean we had outhouses, just like Little House on the Prairie. How many of you guys have ever watched that show? My grandmother worked at a factory called Troxel, and my grandmother was a very hard worker. She always did what she needed to do to make sure her family was taken care of. See, my mother gave birth to me when she was 15 years old, and because of that, my grandmother raised me. I remember laying across my grandmother's lap one day, and I noticed that her pinky finger was cut off. Not her pinky, but this finger was cut off. And I asked her what happened, and she said, my machine got jammed and it cut off my finger. She said, but it's all right, it doesn't hurt anymore. And I used to watch my grandmother get up and go to work every single day, and I used to ask myself, why would you go back to some place that hurts you? But it wasn't until I grew up that I realized she didn't go back because she wanted to. She went back because she had to. By the time I turned 12, my grandmother realized that she just couldn't take it anymore. It was too hard. The factory that she worked at wasn't unionized. She continued to be hurt, and she was working for very little money. So after 29 years, my grandparents decided to remarry and bring the family to Wisconsin. My grandfather lived in Milwaukee. He worked at A.O. Smith. And we always thought that he was rich because he had nice clothes and he drove a nice car. So we loaded up the car. We put everything that we could bring in a Cadillac, which only consisted of our garbage bag with our clothes, and we moved to Milwaukee. You're talking about a child that's 12 years old. I left the only home I knew. I left my mom, my brothers, my friends, all my toys, and to me, that was everything I had. But I knew that once we got to Wisconsin, things were going to be better because my grandparents told me so. I was shocked to find out when we got here that my grandfather wasn't rich. As a matter of fact, we were moving to the ghetto. But that was still okay, because life at that point had already begun to get better. And for a 12-year-old child, that began with running water in the kitchen and a flushing toilet in the bathroom, something we had never had before. Now, as time went on, my grandparents never adopted me. So when I got to Milwaukee, I didn't have health insurance. And that was an issue. I remember my grandfather sitting me down at the table and saying, I told your mother I would take care of you. And I can't do that if I can't get you to a doctor. See, when my grandparents relocated us here, he brought me, my 2 aunts, my 2 cousins, later my uncle, his wife, and their 2 kids. And he worked 2 jobs. So there wasn't any extra money for health insurance for me. Somebody told my grandmother about a place called Planned Parenthood, that I could at least go and get health checks and have my female reproductive needs taken care of. So my grandmother took me to Planned Parenthood. But before she took me there, we had a conversation. And she told me about how much better things were for women nowadays because we had opportunities. See, when she was coming up, her only choice was to get married. And right after she got married, she had kids. She wanted something better for me. And she wanted to give me the opportunity to fulfill my dreams and to have a life. But most importantly, she wanted to give me a choice. So my grandmother took me to Planned Parenthood at 14, and Planned Parenthood was all I've ever known. To this day, I am still a patient of Planned Parenthood. Because of Planned Parenthood and the education that I got from there, I was the first in my family to graduate from college, to buy a home, to own my own business, and now to be a legislator in the state assembly. My family suffered from teenage pregnancies for 4 generations. My grandmother didn't raise my mother because she was a teenage mom. Her mother did. My mother didn't raise me because she was a teenage mom. My grandmother did. But now I'm raising my daughter because I had a choice. Planned Parenthood didn't just help me succeed. It helped me break a generational curse.